So here, talk through the Starship Battle variation by Carl Worth. The first step I always take in a puzzle like this, it's maybe more of a battleship's thinking, but I see that there's a very low count in the rows, a total of 7 ship segments identified, and so I would just mark for myself, in this case, the maximum number that the empty rows can take, and that's going to be based on the total number of regions that are in those spaces, and so I get these counts 4, 6, and 4. Adding up the 7 that remain, I get a total count of 21, which means that the actual number in these spots is either 3 or 4, 5 or 6, 3 or 4. There's not as much information in the columns right now. It looks like the 4 and 2 clues are going to be really checksums to force some of the later pairings. So I think thinking about the rows and thinking about the regions is where to start. Another thing, because of these numbers of 1s being present, is that there's going to be some limitations in the actual regions that can get used. You can look right now in the center, look to be some pretty limited spaces. If I used a cell like this, I would actually make impossible the diagonal cell here in this region, but I can't take 2 cells in these regions together. So you're able to quickly cancel the bottom of those 2 cells for the same reason. Get something started like this. Now we can start to do some thinking based on the fact there will be some ship segment somewhere in this row, in this middle region. That's going to use up this clue. There's going to be some ship segment in that region, right in this space. We have 2 clues to place here and 2 regions that only have cells in those rows. This actually clears everything else in rows 8 and 9. I get to where I have just 1 cell left here. That at least seems to be the initial step to do here. It doesn't exactly yet work up top. There aren't 3 regions or subsets of regions that exclusively sit in these rows, but we'll see that it's able to be used shortly. Now actually what I'm seeing is that this 4 clue is valuable. I actually just have 4 total regions that can be used. Mark those in. The last ship segment's going to sit up here. Note that wherever it sits, if it's here, here, or here, which will fill the 1 clue, it will mark as impossible those 2 cells. So now I think the logic in this puzzle shifts slightly, and this gets to more thinking about the ship inventory. There are going to be 2 things we'll need to do in this puzzle. The first is look to place the 4s and the 3s, and the second is to not use up too many of the submarine shapes. And so to at least get started there, let's recognize that right now we've placed 2 subs. Whichever cell the ship comes up here will be a 1-cell submarine. This is a 1-cell submarine. Whichever ship fills this row will be a 1-cell submarine. Notice if it's here, 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 it can't extend further in that region, so it gets isolated. What that will start to allow us to do is think about how particular placements would fully lead to breaks in the puzzle by giving us more than 5 total subs, or more than 4 total subs. It's not as easy to see right now, we'll get to it in a bit, but for instance, if I use this cell, I'm going to certainly place a submarine here. This becomes a submarine there, that's 4 submarines, and the last ship here would become a 5th submarine. So what we'll do is run into cases where that 5th submarine, or having more than 4 submarines in general, is going to drive the thinking. But let's shift to the other idea I said. Let's look to place the 4 tall ships. We knew at the start it couldn't be in any row but the center row. At the start it looked like it could actually possibly be in some of these vertical spaces, but if you inventory the columns that are left, there are no columns that have 3 region boundaries in a set. So the 4 has to sit in the center. The 4 has to use these 2 cells, and it will either come right and take these 2 or left and take those 2. And the presence of a ship segment down here excludes this option to the right. So this is the battleship. We can then think quickly about trying to place some of the 3 long ships. You can't get a 3 long ship up here. You could get one down here. So let me just mark quickly. There could be a 3. Vertically, in these bottom rows, there can't be a 3 until you get to this situation, or this situation, or this situation, or this situation. Note that in all cases, the vertical 3 will use this column clue, or sorry, this row clue. And so if it's here, or I guess actually if we use this one, it would eliminate the cell and block that off, but it will use one of these at least. You can only place one vertical 3 up here, so the logic that you can deduce is there's some 3-cell ship up top, and there must be this 3-cell ship down below. So we'll put that in. We're going to connect back to the submarine thinking. We have a ship segment here. It cancels off this block. If the remaining ship segment is on this far right, that's going to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 submarines. That's no good, so this has to be another destroyer. That now uses all the segments in this column. We get a ship segment here. It has to use one of the cells in this region. Notice already kind of canceled the one immediately to the right. This has to use one of the cells in this region. Notice we've now isolated this region, which will have a single cell, and that will be the final submarine. So every place we have a ship that looks to be taking one segment, it's got to take at least one more. If this region has nothing else to connect to, it has to connect to this ship, again, to not get too many submarines in the grid. So this is the other 3-cell ship. Here we fill in this cell, but it can't take another to become a submarine. Cancel off this row. That's the last submarines up top. So we get our way through this puzzle. It was a kind of clever hybrid of Star Battle and Battleship. I really liked how the low row clues got us thinking about region sizes at the start. It has a lot of thinking about placing large and small ships. I really found the submarine counting as the cleanest logical path through the grid. Hope you learned something in the context of this puzzle that may apply to Battleships puzzles in general, but maybe Carl will make us another one of these variants pretty soon.